Welcome to Women in the Middle Entrepreneurs, the podcast that gives you an unfiltered, behind-the-scenes look at what it's really like being a woman in the middle who's over 50 and following her entrepreneurial dreams. Grab a superhero cape, girlfriend, because you deserve one. I'm your host, Master Certified Life Coach and Midlife Mentor, Suzy Rosenstein, and I am excited to inspire you with interviews that feature all of this midlife amazingness. Let's go. Hey there, welcome back to the show. We have another really exciting interview ahead of us today about fear related to following through on your dreams. And I can so relate to that. That was exactly part of my story too. Today, you're going to be meeting Patty Farmer, a woman in the middle entrepreneur who's an international speaker, podcast host, and magazine publisher, and is dreaming about stepping into producing events for her clients as well. Welcome to the show, Patty. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here, Suzy.
Me too. And just in the little pre-interview we were having lots of fun. So I know it's going to be a really great conversation. So we're going to be going into, things about your midlife entrepreneur story. We're going to be talking about your business and what's going really well. And also what midlife issues might be getting in your way a little bit here and there to some extent, maybe in your life as well as a business owner, however it plays out for you. So let's get started with how old you are, how long you've been an entrepreneur, and your entrepreneurial journey. So take it away.
Sure. So I'm 60 plus, and I've been in business for about 25, 26 years now. And I really think that the entrepreneur journey is kind of meandering, right? A lot of times people think we get from here to here and it's just quite that simple, but it really isn't, right? It's always so entrepreneurish. And I think that is what is so exciting. So for me, becoming an entrepreneur was easy. My biggest fear first, which is kind of funny when you look back at it, because it's always funny when you look back at it, right?
Totally.
Was that I just didn't think I wanted to be a speaker. I had a real fear about being a speaker. And now that I look back, I've been a speaker for about 13 years. And when I look back at that journey, I didn't want to do it. And I agreed to do it one time for a friend to step in to help her out. And I did it. And I have to tell you, it was so scary to do. But when I got done doing it, like 37 people came up to me afterwards and said, how can we work with you? Like 37 people. And there were only 46 in the room. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to learn to be the best speaker I can. But here was my fear. The biggest fear around that was that I didn't think, like I knew I was smart and I knew that I was a strategist and I knew my craft. I knew that. What I didn't feel comfortable about though was, I didn't think I was eloquent. I didn't think I could wear soap opera dresses, what I like to call them, that really just wasn't me. And It took me a little while for me to figure out that it wasn't even about me. It was really about them, and that it wasn't about changing me. It was really more about speaking in front of the people who wanted to hear it the way I said it. And that really changed the trajectory of my whole business.
I can totally see that. I had a similar kind of epiphany about laughing and being silly. So I can't help myself. I have stupid jokes. I'm a silly person. I love puns. I laugh a lot. And it wasn't until, I worked for 27 years in a addiction and mental health and in publishing and in a hospital, teaching hospital kind of setting. And, I remember feeling that too silly is not professional, right? That was the way I was thinking about it. And so when you transition into being an entrepreneur and you have to get your head around your personal brand as well as your niche, it came out a little bit, but I was always just thinking, I don't know, I'm already under 5 foot. Is this going to make it just ridiculous? Is it too much to be myself? Is it going to help me professionally? What kind of an impact is it going to have? And then slowly but surely, I started to see iTunes reviews commenting on my upbeat nature, my giggle, how bringing that into difficult issues having to do with midlife and transition and all the stuff we deal with was very helpful. It actually made not just me, but the information more accessible. And when I started to see that, I just the biggest light bulb went off. in my head that's so obvious if you've already figured this out. But you're right. It's not about us as much as it's about what the information means and how well it's landing with the people looking for it. And if it's helpful for you to be your authentic self because you're more relaxed, you're able to speak better without being self-conscious and all that other stuff, it's way more effective. So your comment about a soap opera dress is so funny because I would also think something like that when you're speaking, you need to look a certain way and sound a certain way, right? So how did you figure that out? How did you test the waters, so to speak?
Well, it was really tough, but what ended up happening was I decided for myself that because this was something that I was going to do, that I was going to become the best at it, right? So I reached out to all kinds of people that I knew who were already doing it. But the funny thing is you can reach out to all kinds of experts, but you don't get the same information. Right? They all said something different. It's kind of like when you're pregnant and you read the book and then you don't like it. Well, read a different book, right? Because they all say different things, right? So then I just realized that I had to figure it out for myself. And that's when I really realized I just needed to be authentically who I was, because it was too hard to try to remember to be somebody else.
It is hard.
And I think it's something we can learn about everything we do.
What do you mean?
I think it's that everything we do, stop trying to copy somebody else and be yourself.
Yes, totally. Because, we're in a culture of hacks. If you just take this advice and you can.
Oh, my goodness. Went down wrong. See, that could happen when you're speaking too. Like you never know. You have to be able to roll with it. And I think as an entrepreneur, sometimes we could really go into a place and think, oh my gosh, I did that. Why? Because other people don't cough, right? It makes you more relatable. We don't have to be perfect. It's the imperfections that make it so people can relate. And I think as an entrepreneur, so many people are afraid and fearful of stepping into something they want to do. But when they see other people that are doing it, that maybe they cough, or maybe they miss a step, or maybe whatever, it just makes them realize, oh my gosh, I can do that too.
Oh my gosh, Patty. The other day I was doing a Facebook Live and I looked closely and I realized my shirt was on inside out. And when I realized it, I'm just like, it was in real time. I'm talking about something. I'm like, wait a minute, is my shirt inside out? I lean in to try to see it bigger. And because, of course, the vision is always an issue too. Sure enough, my shirt was inside out and I was just cracking up. And I got, positive feedback on that. Of course, it absolutely helps. But you're right. Being real, being authentic, real people cough, real people repeat themselves, real people forget what they're saying. And that's another thing that I've noticed in, I don't do a lot of speaking on stages, but certainly I'm online and have the podcasts and a lot of times I forget what I'm saying. So I feel more comfortable with notes and that's okay. I talk about the notes. It just makes it
I think so. Right. I mean, that makes people feel better too. So I think that really does make a lot of sense. I think everybody has a fear of something. That's why everybody's not doing every single thing they want to do, or they have to progressively do them, right? Oh, that wasn't so bad. Okay, maybe I could take a baby step and do this, and maybe I could take a baby step and do that. And so I think that is what has to happen, but that's what keeps it real, right?
Totally. But also, I find it really interesting that you were scared to speak. And of course, that's very common. Who isn't scared to speak? The vast majority of people, it's one of the scariest things ever. But when you had that positive outcome, you didn't take that baby step approach. You're just like, oh my God, I'm going to be the best speaker ever. This is amazing. That took a lot of guts to even admit that to yourself, that you're going to really go all in on something that you found so scary. Is that?
And it actually worked for me. It worked for me too.
Wow.
Because what happened was after that, I went and told all my speaker friends that I was ready to speak. And this is what was really funny. This was literally the thing that changed my life. Was I decided I was going to be a speaker. I told a few of my friends. 3 days later, I got a phone call from a friend that said, Patty, I heard that you're ready to step into speaking. I said, yeah, I'm going to kind of dip my toe. And she says, well, I have an opportunity for you. And I said, what's that? She says, I need you to get on a plane and come speak. I know you taught and teach all the time about using LinkedIn. So can you come and speak about that? And I was like, when? She said, well, I need you to get on a plane tonight. I said, tonight? She said, yes, we had somebody get appendicitis and we need somebody to step in. She says, they'll pay you like $10,000. And I was like, so tonight I have to get on a plane. Where am I going? She says, London. I said, I'm going on a plane to London. She said, yes. So my husband was in the background and he's like, I thought you said you were going to say yes to opportunities. So I said, okay. So I put my big girl panties on. I said yes. I got on the plane, wrote my speech on the plane. Thank goodness it was a long flight. And I literally went and spoke and got booked 3 other times while I was there. And so basically what that meant is in 2 weeks, I became an international speaker in less than 2 weeks. So it changed the trajectory of my business. So I think a lot of times when we're fearful, we need to just say yes, step into it, and then figure out how you're going to fly it, the parachute on the way down. But I really honestly really think that we build it up in our head a lot more. And I have to tell you, continuing into my journey, I find that every time I feel fear, that's my gut telling me that that's what I'm supposed to do.
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, I know as a listener right now, you can't see my face, but my jaw dropped when Patty's describing how quickly she made the decision and how huge a decision it was, not only to do a speech, but to have to get your act together and fly overseas and all of it. And then to do so well and realize that you just stepped into your future. I mean, that's really, really something. Thank you so much for sharing that story because I haven't heard anything like that before. But you're right about when you have a gut feeling, even if it's a negative emotion like fear, it's still telling you something. It's still coming from the way you're thinking. But to lean into it rather than run for the hills is it takes a lot of courage because I'm sure running for the hills is it's always an option.
And it's usually your first option. It's usually the first thing you think, oh my goodness, no, I don't want to do it. And I have to say that kept on happening too, because once I became a speaker and then, I had a podcast and then, I published the magazine, which, you know what? I became a magazine publisher because I didn't want to blog. Because this is what I tell people all the time. If there's something in your business, so entrepreneurs hear this, if there's something you really don't want to do and you're just freaking out about it all the time, or you just literally don't want to do it because you don't like it, there's always another way. It's like going to the gym. There's more than one exercise that will work that muscle. So for me, I just felt like every time I would try to write my blogs, it was like, oh. And so I thought, what could I do to not do this? And I woke up one day and said, you know what? I'm never blogging again. And everybody was like, oh my gosh, you have to blog. And I'm like, nope, I'm going to publish a magazine. Then I only have to write an article every 3 months. And I'm going to do that. And now I could spotlight my network and pull in other experts. And I won't have to provide all the content. And we've been doing that for 5 years now. And we just hit 200,000 subscribers. So the fact of the matter is, that was like the next thing. So then when I said, oh, you know what? I'm going to do an event. When I did my very first event, I was so worried and fearful about the perception that because I already did these other things. So here's what I'm going to say. A lot of times people think it's more fearful when you haven't done it. But what I'm going to tell you is if you've never done it yet and you fail, hardly anybody's going to notice anyway.
So true.
What I thought about was like, oh my gosh, now people are seeing me on stages and they're hearing me. And what if I fail? And I didn't want to fail publicly. So I told myself, okay, I'm going to quietly invite people to this event, which I had 14 people at my first one. And I've been doing it for this year, it'll be 15 years now. And it's a multi-7-figure event now. So if I had said no, because I was afraid, 14 people, that's how many people I had, right? So every step in my journey was fear. Every one. I thought, oh my gosh, that's so scary. But you know what happens? The people there said, what would be so cool, Patty? What would be really cool if you expanded this for another day and talked about speaking? And then it was like, it'd be really cool, Patty. It'd be really great if when you did this event, you did like an alumni one for people who've already come before. Like your people will tell you what else they need from you. And if you just lean in and listen, it works. And so, yes, is every time it's fearful? Every single time.
I love it. And you do it anyway. And of course, we hear that, feel the fear and do it anyway. But it's really like a thought error to think that it shouldn't be fearful. Why wouldn't something new be fearful?
Exactly.
It makes more sense that there would be a little fear and discomfort coming from something that you thought about as new. But once you have more experience, you gain more confidence and yada, yada. But it's so interesting to just expect the fear and do it because you know you're going to learn regardless of what happens. And thank you for sharing that it was just 14 people that showed up. I think people, look at you and your success, but you really did start from the beginning like everybody else.
Exactly. And I think it happens in our personal life too. Just recently, here I am in my 60s, and I didn't know how to drive a stick shift. and I was like, I was so fearful. I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to drive a stick shift. Who doesn't know how to drive a stick shift? Right. And here's another thing that I was really fearful. I don't know how to swim.
Oh,
I never learned how to swim when I was growing up. And so my husband, he wants to have a boat. And I'm like, but I don't know how to swim. So I was fearful of being on the boat.
right.
So I had to tell myself, okay, so am I going to let myself not go on a boat? Because I am fearful. So what are my options, right? Either I'm going to have to wear a life vest all the time, or I could take swimming lessons, right? One or the other. Same thing. I was like, oh, I really want this super, really cool convertible, but it would be really cool if it was a stick shift, right? So what could I do? And I didn't. And I have to tell you, I really suck at driving that stick shift, but it's a hybrid. So I could do both. I got one that's like, oh, it could be automatic or it could be a stick shift, which basically means when my husband drives it, he uses the stick and I pretty much use auto. But I have to tell you, we let things stand in our way in our personal life and in our business because we're fearful.
Absolutely.
Right? And where I am right now, I'll be honest, I'm right at that step right now of being fearful in the next thing I want to do, but I'm going to
do. Right. So I was just going to ask you about that because in your notes, you mentioned that you're on you're really wanting to go in another direction about hosting events for clients. And it has you a little, right, just what you said, in that spot again. So tell us what is that really like for you?
So the biggest fear I have is, back in the day, and probably still, people like to tell you all the time, work in your brilliance, hire other people to work in theirs, outsource what you don't like and what you're not good at. And I've literally done that my whole career. Right. And so for me, I just don't like tech. I love technology. I love teaching technology. I just don't like doing the technology. So I always hire it out. Right. I send it out. I have a team that does all that for me. Well, during COVID, when everything happened, a lot of things changed in events. We weren't really going to in-person events anymore. And people were doing a lot more on Zoom. And I thought to myself, well, what would it be like to do virtual live events? Right? You know how you see somebody, they're standing on a stage, it's live, and you see all those, floor to ceiling monitors. I was like, what would that be like to do that? Right? Instead of just being on Zoom. And I thought, I think people would do that. Not everybody's wanting to travel, and I do in-person events. So I started doing it. And now here's my big project. So my big project for 2024 is I live in Dallas and I'm going to build one. I'm going to build a studio. So it's in the middle of the country. And this way I can have all my clients come there. I can do all my own events in the studio. And I'm just going to do my own virtual live events and then bring other people in. And I'm just going to hire a contract team to do the AV work because I don't want to do that part. Right. So I'm excited. But I thought to myself, what would make that less scary for me? Because literally when I say fear, I mean fearful. And I didn't say this earlier, and it's probably a good time to say it. But when I first started speaking, I was so scared. I got violently ill every time before I got on stage for 18 months.
Wow.
18 months every time I would get sick. So when I was thinking about doing this, I started getting that sick feeling. I'm like, uh-oh, and whatever. And I thought, well, what would make it easier? So here's how I'm baby stepping it. So I live in a 2-story house. It's just my husband and I. And upstairs, we have this big, huge theater and loft. So I just hired somebody to come in, and I'm going to turn my whole loft into a studio and start a little bit smaller and doing it in my studio in my home so I can learn everything about it before I build the studio in 2024. So, and I just think that it makes a lot more sense to do that. And this way, when they're my clients, they can just come to my home, stay in my spare room. Let's film all your stuff too. And so I'm really, really excited about that. A little fearful because I still don't know the tech, but it's okay. I'm going to do it anyway.
That is a baby step, even though if you're listening, this might sound still huge and scary, right? It's all depending on what you're exposed to and how big you dream. But it really is a baby step. There's less investment. It's easier for you to pop in your pajamas and fiddle with a few things. It's always easier to start with your own stuff, to get to know local contractors and people that you can start to have relationships with before you really have to rely on them for giant things that are external to you. Oh, I think it's fascinating. Like, again, my jaw is dropped. It's amazing.
Mic drop.
And I love that you just said that you're excited. Like, that's the opposite of fear. So as long as the pendulum switches a little bit, right?
I think you can have both at the same time. Why does it have to be one or the other? As a woman, I kind of believe when people say to me all the time, Patty, would you rather have this or that? Would you want to go here or there? I'm like, why do I only have one? I'm like, I can have both. I don't have to pick. Right. So I give myself permission to live my life in joy, right? In my business, in my life. I don't do anything that doesn't bring me joy. Does it bring me fear first? Yes. But again, I keep going back to looking at my career and thinking, you know what, Patty, every time you were afraid and did it anyway, it worked. Now, were there little things along the way that if I went back, I would say, oh, I think I would have done this a little different? Of course. Right. But that's okay. So everything has stepped me forward in my business. Right. And I wouldn't be where I am today if I hadn't leaned in and said, oh, I was afraid. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? You'll fail. So what? Dust yourself off, get back up. Because here's what I say. It's messy in the middle,
totally.
right? It's messy in the middle, but your mess is your message every single time.
Yeah, that's so true. Why do you think you were attracted to pushing your business this way? Because this is different. You're not coaching on content. You're not coaching on your own expertise, right? So this is really different.
Why? It is and it isn't. Because, a lot of times people say to me all the time, oh my gosh, Patty, you do so many things. I'm like, no, I don't. I do one thing, marketing and media. I'm a marketing and media strategist. I speak on it. Everything I do. My magazine and podcasts are called Marketing, Media, and Money because my gift is monetizing. That's my gift, being able to help people to monetize what they do. And so it just makes sense for me to keep pushing the envelope. How else can we do media? What else can we do? And it always starts with my clients, and then I do it for myself too. And then I teach on it. So for me, it really kind of isn't any different. It's just a different way to do it. And not only that, but it always helps to have your own assets, right? To own your own assets is really good, no matter how small they are. When I went and decided to do this project, I went and looked at other places too. There's a big place in Miami. I just got back from Las Vegas a few weeks ago, looking at other studios. And I looked at them and said, oh, I love the way they did this. Oh, but I love the way this person put in 40 seats so they could bring in VIP in person too. I was like, oh, I'm going to do that. But then when I looked at how they did the back, I was like, oh my goodness, that looks so scary. But then when they kind of broke it down for me, it's like, they're like, oh, well, Patty, you don't have to have people there all the time. You just contract them. You have a team and they just come in when you have somebody. If they don't, they're not there. And I'm like, oh, well, that's not such a big deal. Right. So when you think about it and you break it down, so I think that's the thing. When you're a visionary and when you're an entrepreneur, we are, whether we realize it or not. It's a big word to step into, but we are. But it's taking that vision and breaking it down into bite-sized pieces. Nobody says you have to go from this to this in one step. Take the steps as it works for you. You know what I mean? And I think I think that makes a lot more sense. And it does make it a lot less scary, really.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, now another part of the this podcast that I get very excited about is to talk about something that can be very challenging for a lot of us. And the reason I get excited about it is because not enough people are talking about what is really going on when you are in midlife, and we've got midlife issues, and they do affect us and our business. But as women, we're just so used to juggling everything that a lot of times we don't even appreciate what's going on. The issue that you mentioned, one of them in your notes, was your personal midlife journey involves balancing love and passion for travel, and hubby's not yet retired and unable to come with you. So being out of sync with retirement, with friends and partners, is a huge issue when you're an entrepreneur in midlife, because we are gearing up. We're like really going all in. And some of us around us aren't there yet. Or in your case, it takes you traveling and your husband can't go. So what's that whole thing like for you?
So traveling is my hot button. I love it. And I think a lot of times if there's things people really love, so everything for me is start with the lifestyle you want to live, right? Design the lifestyle you want to live, then build a business that supports it. So in my mind, I'm like, what do I love? And I love to travel. And I have 6 daughters and they live all over the United States. So I travel to see them, but I really like traveling to destinations. So when I became a speaker, I made a decision and I said, well, how could I combine those two things? How could I combine speaking with being able to travel? So I'm probably out of the country, I have to say, Suzy, about 15 times a year. I travel all over the world. I've been to Italy, which is my happy place, like 6 times. And so I actually bought a villa there. And that was exciting for me. But literally, I love to travel. And so my husband can't go with me all the time. However, what we have done is, in order to step me there, every time I go speak at places internationally, I just add, a couple days at the front and a couple days at the end of it. And this way I get to still travel and have fun. But yet I'm not like saying, hey, babe, sorry, you're not retired. I'm going to go spend, 2 weeks in Italy. See you when I get back. Right. So it kind of works though, because I am working and stuff. And so he loves it too, because he loves to travel, but not quite as much as me. But it really, really works. And I also choose to speak a lot, like at women's conferences, but I speak a lot at retreats, which is the next thing for me too. That's my next step that I'm going to do in that travel, is to do those retreats. But I like it because I like going out of the country. And as a woman, how fun is it to be able to pamper yourself, learn new things, and then get to take a vacation, and it's business, right? So so it has worked for me to balance that for myself and not feel guilty.
So when the guilt comes in, though, is it coming from, like, has your husband expressed that he really wishes he could go more with you? Or is it you just thinking about what you should be doing?
My husband never does that. He loves it for me to be able to do those things. So my husband's super my cheerleader and supporter. And he's like, well, just because I can't go doesn't mean you shouldn't be able to go. But actually, as women, I think sometimes if he would have gave me a hard time about it, I wouldn't have felt as guilty about it. Then I think I would have got my back up and been like, well, it's not my fault, but whatever. The fact that he is so good about it, I think is sometimes what makes me feel guilty, right? Because I'm like, oh, I know, but I really wish you could be here with me. But I've kind of got over that because I feel like I share it with him. I'm so happy when I come back. And not only that, but how I got around that is that whenever I travel internationally and I'm doing that, I take 50% of my fee and put it in our retirement fund. So it works.
Oh, that's so interesting. It's so clear cut, and it's certainly a way to share a goal.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's awesome. So another thing that you mentioned is that you know what you want now and how to get it, and it is aligning with your priorities. What was it like for you to really get clear on the balance that's required? Because as you were moving forward, you're pursuing stuff that you're afraid of, you're taking on new challenges within your focus, but like building something that's external is something that was really different. Figuring out how how to really balance all of the travel in the way that you're doing it. So what was it like for you to seek clarity when some of the things weren't so clear about how you were going to make it happen?
I think it was hard at first, but I just sat down and really realized that everything I do needs to move me closer to my goal. And as long as it does, I'm okay with it. I'm okay with giving myself permission, right? I think that is something that I think women, when we get a little older, we get better at, right? We get better at saying, you know what? I've done so much. It's okay to give myself permission to do these things, right? So I think that's what I am really focusing on, is that I gave myself permission to live my absolute best life. And once I did, here's the key. Once you give yourself that permission, then you have to ask yourself, well, what does that look like? Because what it might have looked like before, and really opening up that and saying, what would that really look like if I could? Right. And that's what I call designing your life, like live your life and your business by design, not default.
Exactly.
That's the motto for me. I live my life and my business by design, not default. And it's really important to me to focus on that. Like I have a couple things right now, like for example, with all the traveling I want to do and what I want in my future, like I need to be in better shape. To be honest, like
I was just going to ask you about self-care with the travel, because that is certainly, I'm talking to so many midlife women. Self-care is such an issue, no matter the situation that most of us are in. But with travel, it really takes that challenge to another level. So yeah, how are you dealing with that?
It did. Like, what was the defining moment for me was like, I had also gave myself permission. And I know this is kind of a touchy subject for women too. So I'm just going to be real here. That was also one of the fears, is like, oh, when I was going to speak, was because, I'm not a size 5, right? I'm not a size 5. And I always thought that people would judge me for that too. Oh, and stuff. And I finally had to get over myself on that too. And actually, that took my best friend. She actually said to me one day, it was so funny. She said, Patty, do you think when people hear you or meet you, that what? You think that they think you're a size 5 and then they see you on stage and like, oh my God, I thought you was a size 5. Right. It's so funny. And she made me laugh. And I was like, Patty, get over yourself. Right. But here was the defining moment. I was in Italy and we went to the Spanish Steps, and the other speakers that were at that event, we went to the Pantheon, and then we were looking at the Spanish Steps and they all wanted to walk up them. And I'm like, no, there was no way I was going to be able to walk up those Spanish Steps. And as I stood at the bottom and took pictures and watched them, I thought to myself, Betty, it isn't just this. I mean, where are you going to go that you're going to want to walk here? And I can walk, and walking is no problem. Going up steps, however, was a little bit different. Right. And I thought, wow, I hadn't really realized what that was going to look like. So I made a goal for myself that I was going to not worry so much and put all this pressure to diet or anything. I was just going to change my lifestyle, be a little bit healthier so I could live my best life on a personal level as well. Right. And that has happened over the last year. And I think that just makes me feel so good. And, it isn't always about losing weight. So I want people to know it isn't about losing weight. It doesn't matter what size you are. You could be a size 5, but that doesn't mean that you could walk for 2 miles without huffing and puffing, right? What shape are you in? And that comes in all sizes. So really for me, it was like, oh, because if you sit on a computer all day long, you're really not exercising or anything, right? So I had to make some changes in my life. And those changes were for me. And once I gave myself permission to do that, I think of it as I'm preparing for my retirement. I'm preparing for that best life as I am living it, instead of doing the thing that everybody tends to want to do, is like, as soon as I get this or as soon as I achieve this, I'll do that. Just take, again, baby steps, move forward, get closer to your dream. And that's how we achieve them.
Can you give me one example of one of the changes that you are, prioritizing right now?
Sure. So one of them is exercise for sure. So now I get up an hour earlier, and every night before I go to bed, I set my workout clothes and I set them in the bathroom. So when I get dressed, I automatically get into my workout clothes. And then I do that before I shower, before I hit my computer. Now, with that said, I have a gym in my house. My husband works out all the time. Now, let me say, I am not like, ooh, I'm going to go work out for an hour and a half and I'm hardcore. No, I'm still not that. I don't know if I'll ever be that. I keep waiting for that love of exercise to kick in. Hasn't yet, but I do move every day, right? Every day it's like, what kind of movement can I do today? Right. So I just want to do some type of movement, whatever that is. And actually, I created this list of, there's this thing that's going around. Everybody's probably heard of it because it's been around for a while, called 75 Hard. I don't know if you've heard of it.
I have actually.
Yeah. So 75 Hard. And I looked at all the things they wanted you to do for that. Exercise twice a day, one of them outside. You got to drink a gallon of water. You got to do this, this, this. And I looked at that and I'm like, no. You know why? Because as an entrepreneur, my day changes all the time. Right? Yeah. So I just sat down and I thought about it, beat myself up for a few minutes. And then I was like, what could I do to make that work for me? So I changed it to 75 committed. And I wrote down 10 things that I would love to do, right? Read every day, something that was personal and business development, spend at least 1 hour with my husband every single night, totally present, no devices, right? Exercise every day. Like there were certain things that were on my list. And I just gave myself grace and said, I'm going to commit to doing 8 of the 10. I give myself some grace. 8 of the 10 I'm going to do every day. And that has really, really worked for me. So I feel like we don't have to beat ourselves up.
No, we don't. That is for sure. We do not. So would you say, in terms of where you're focusing right now, it would be this personal self-care stuff with this 8 out of 10. That's amazing. And more movement as a gradual way to continue just to be that kind of a person who moves more and whatnot. And then the focus in your business is that studio and that arm of your business. Is that clear about what your main focus is right now?
Yeah, it's what I'm focusing on. I feel like it's the next progression. And really, because one of the things I think I told you earlier about monetizing is I know so many coaches and speakers, right? Entrepreneurs, they're out there busting it, but they're not always monetizing it. Even speakers, like I have to tell you, when I became a speaker, I thought every speaker made $1 million. It was a shock to me. I'm like, really? Because they all look like they do, right? And I realized that wasn't so. And if somebody would have told me 13 years ago that if you fast forward 10 years, that 90% of my clients would be coaches and speakers, and that I would be helping them not to speak. I don't do that, but helping them to pitch and helping them to know how to market themselves to monetize their business, I'd have laughed. I would have never got that. But here's the thing. When you show up authentically, people see what you do and they see that you're not trying to hide behind the curtain, right? And you do that. People are like, wow, that's really great that you've done that. Can you show me how to do that? Right? And it works. You don't have to say, oh no, I'm going to do this. All those steps in my journey, I have to tell you, every one of them was almost accidental in a way, right? Every one of them was a step that I was afraid. And I said, no, I'm just going to do it anyway. What's the worst that could happen? I'll fail. Okay, that's okay. I'll just do something else. And every time, now, did every single one of them work? No. Or work the way I want them to? No, they didn't, right? And I will just say this because I think it's important, is one of the things that I was really clear on in the beginning. And so I hope people hear this, is a lot of times when you're an entrepreneur, we want to do a lot of things. And it's really can be something that will hurt you if you have one fund, here's the pot, and you start doing all these things out of that same fund. Because then when you lose money, all of a sudden you don't know where you did, right? So I didn't do that. I literally was clear on that because of what I do for a living. So what I do and what I suggest people do is, yes, sometimes when I started something new, I said, okay, so here's what's going to happen. My business is going to fund that new endeavor for 6 months. And at the end of 6 months, it needs to be making money for itself. So every one of the things that I do makes money and funds itself once it gets to whatever that time period I think it needs. If it doesn't, then I need to tweak it and say, what changes can I make? Or maybe this wasn't the right time. Maybe this wasn't a division I should have right now. Mm-hmm. And so it doesn't mean that your business fails. It just means that one little thing did. And if you can look at it that way, instead of looking at this big, huge picture, I think it becomes much easier. So what if this little thing here wasn't the right type.
No, that's
It's
really
okay.
great advice. Yeah, yeah. Exactly. It doesn't mean you're a failure and your whole business is a failure. It's one new idea didn't work out the way you thought it was going to work out. Yeah. So, Patty, you've given us so much and you've been authentic and fun. I really appreciate it. How can people best get in touch with you?
I would say the best way to get in touch with me is to just go to my website, which is pattyfarmer.com, Patty's with the Y. They'll find everything there, podcast, magazine, all my gifts, social, wherever. That's my hub. That's where I'm at. Find what you need, take it. And, I just want to serve. The way I do my business is lead with contribution and compensation will follow. So that's how I feel about everything. So just go to my website, pattyfarmer.com, and take what you want.
Well, I've already been there. I signed up for the magazine. You're kind of stuck with me now. I think you're amazing. Thank you so much for being on the show today. I really love what you're doing. And I just think you're awesome. Like, you're really drawing me in. You're very, very approachable. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Suzy. It was really a pleasure to be here.
So good. All right. That's it for now. If you're listening and loving what you hear, please like and subscribe. Reviews are great too and much appreciated. And if you're a woman in the middle who's 50 or over and an entrepreneur and would also like to come on the show, please go to www.midlifeinterviews.com and fill out an application. I'd love to have you on to share your story too. Thanks so much for listening. It's never too late for you to put yourself on your agenda. I'm Suzy Rosenstein, and I'll talk to you again soon. Now, real quick before we say goodbye, if you are connecting with this show, I'd love to invite you to a happiness breakthrough coaching session. It's my laser-focused coaching call that will help you get clear about what's getting in your way as a woman in the middle entrepreneur and confident about your next steps to more happiness in your next chapter. Head over to www.nextchapterbreakthrough.com. Talk to you soon.